Right, welcome everybody to the meeting, which is going to be the final meeting of this panel for this municipal year. The first session is the public meeting, which is going to be webcast to the general public. That session will finish at 11 o'clock, so we need to stick to those times. The main item that we've got on the agenda this morning is a follow-up to one of the housing issues that we've touched on in earlier discussions, which is looking at homelessness and rough sleeping within Kirklees. And we have a report that's already been sent out with the papers, which people hopefully have had a chance to have a look at. And can I welcome to the meeting Kath McGurk, Helen Gildart and Nas Parker, who are going to give us a brief presentation, really look at the highlights of the points that are in the paper, and we're then going to have a discussion around that. Okay, so going on to the agenda, item 1, the minutes of the previous meeting. So, yeah, right, we're happy with those. Any matters arising? Yes, Judith.
Well, that won't work in then. Yeah, just on item 1, about we wanted some information about the bus and rail links between Dewsbury, Huddersfield and Leeds. Yeah. We've still not received that. Don't know if that's going to be forthcoming.
Yeah, that is something that we need to follow up further. So I will take that away and I will discuss that with Peter, and we'll make sure that we're not going to have a further meeting, but I will make sure that some information comes back to people about that. About the first item as well, the penultimate bullet point, the meetings which were being planned by local transport groups in relation to the new Transpennine timetables have been postponed because the timetables have been postponed. There should have been a meeting at Huddersfield Station with several local groups back on the 24th of February, and that was postponed, and it's not been reorganised. There is information that's coming out on various websites, but there hasn't yet been an official release of the new timetables. Anything else?
Oh, technology. Page 3, Chairman. Part way down. I think I'd like to note, for colleagues to note that thanks to the pressure brought by this committee, members of WICA, the Cabinet and others, we now have an additional consultation meeting for Transport for the North in Kirklees. I think it's probably on the same day as the last meeting. I attended the meeting in Calderdale. I have to say, because the comments of the officer from Transport for North were made in the public meeting, they weren't very happy about coming to Kirklees, but thanks to officers from WICA, they've facilitated it. And I hope that those interested in transport in this area will outshine the 10 people that were at Calderdale for that meeting. This is a crucial issue which I think we're all agreed on. And it now behoves us and our colleagues on the wider council to make sure that they get a suitable reception when they come.
Yes, thank you, Martin, for raising that. And it is a very important point, and well done to everybody who's put some pressure on them to come along. It is possible that there might be a Transport for the North person coming along with Network Rail. We had an email yesterday or the day before indicating that, but nothing to confirm it. So we will see who actually turns up this morning.
Sorry, just a couple of bullet points down from that. We did say that the panel were going to look at the work of the Kirklees District Consultation Subcommittee, but we haven't had time to do that, have we? Is that something we're going to roll over to next year?
Yeah, we can follow that up next year. It's one of those things I will discuss with Peter, and if there are significant developments there, I will make sure that that does come out in email to members of the panel. Was there another point? No, right, okay, thank you. Anything else? Item 3, interests. Oh, sorry, membership of the committee. Yeah, so would you like to introduce yourselves? Yeah, we'll start with Judith.
Yeah, I'm Councillor Judith Hughes, all-member ward councillor.
Martin Bolt, councillor for Murfield.
Properly. Yes, Mark Mercer, Co-op Tea.
Yes, and we've also got apologies from Darren O'Donovan. Sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry, and to introduce myself, I'm Councillor Rob Walker, I'm chair of the panel. Yeah. Good point. Right, admissions of the public. This is a public meeting. Members of the public would be, yeah. Sorry, I make a mess of this, aren't I? Yeah, item 3, any interests for this first section? No. Okay, thank you. Number 4, admissions of the public. Yeah, it is a public meeting. Members of the public can come along, and obviously they hopefully will be able to access this from the webcast. Right, so if we can move straight on then to item 4, which is the key thing on today's agenda, which is looking at homelessness and rough sleeping in Kirklees. So I think Helen's going to lead off, but Kath and Naz will take part in answering questions as they arise. What we've decided is that we will have some input and then an opportunity to ask questions rather than waiting right till the end before we have questions. So I'm hoping that this will be more of a discussion, really.
Okay, thank you very much. So obviously you've had the briefing paper that we've drafted for you, which has hopefully given you a bit more detail on some of the issues that we've discussed previously at this panel. The first section of the paper just talks generally about homelessness, and we've put a little bit in there around the definition of homelessness, because homelessness means different things to different people, and there is a range of different understandings, if you like, around homelessness. So it means different things to different people in terms of either being not having a secure home of your own, sofa surfing, or whether at the extreme you're actually, you're sleeping on the streets and you've nowhere at all to live or call your own home. Of course, in the local authority, we have a legal definition of homelessness as well that we need to work to, and we use that in terms of our reporting to government and yourselves around the number of homelessness decisions that we've taken and the number of homelessness acceptances that we have made. The paper explains in some detail the issues that we look at when we're determining whether or not someone is homeless, and we have a duty towards them to secure accommodation for that household or that individual. So the paper includes information on that. What we try to do is to give you a picture, if you like, of the information locally, so for Kirklees, where we're at in terms of acceptances and decisions, so that you can see the trends, if you like. We are clear that since 2016, unfortunately, there has been an upward trend in the number of people that we are seeing and that we are helping through the homelessness legislation. You'll see that there's information also in terms of not just our own figures, but on page 2 of the report, there's information that shows the downward trend over a long period of time. So you can see that we have been, reducing homelessness in Kirklees. We've also given you some information so that you can compare the situation between Kirklees and some of our neighbouring local authorities, the Yorkshire and Humber approach, and England. Now, as you'll see from those figures, we are in Kirklees accepting more households or individuals per thousand of population than some of the other areas. We think that some of the reason for that we'll come on to sort of talk about, but it may be our approach in terms of, especially our approach to early intervention and prevention, especially around single people. And the figures that we can see in the report over the page on the chart indicate that we do in Kirklees accept significantly higher numbers of single people into homelessness, and that's because of the approach we take in assessing their vulnerability, especially around their mental health needs, their disability, etc. And what we're trying to do is obviously to prevent those individuals from not having anywhere to live and therefore maybe ending up on the streets. So we're taking an approach which means that we're helping them to secure accommodation much earlier on in the process. And we think that gives an explanation as to why our figures for acceptances look higher than some of the other areas and even the national picture. I just want to emphasise that we do actually do a lot of prevention activity before we actually take on the homelessness acceptance duty. The service carries out a lot of work with a number of households and individuals very early on in the process. So we do a lot of work with people so that the staff in the team are negotiating with landlords, for example, to ensure that people can stay where they are. Our first port of call is always to see whether or not we can help assist the household or individual remain in their existing property, where it's safe to do so, of course. We do a lot of work with preventing people who are young people. We mediate with families, etc. So there's a lot of work goes on there to try and ensure that people can actually remain at home and aren't even going through the homelessness route at all. Just another thing to point out is that the causes of homelessness seem to be changing in Kirklees. In Kirklees, we've sort of booked the trend nationally where the main cause of people being homeless in Kirklees has more often than not, in recent times, been parents no longer willing to accommodate children or other family members. But we're now starting to see, like the rest of the country really mainly, that the main cause of homelessness is now starting to be the loss of an assured short-hold tenancy in the private rented sector. So obviously that's an area of work that we need to sort of focus on in terms of trying to work with landlords and those tenants to try and ensure that we can help them to sustain their tenancies in the private rented sector. Domestic abuse. Again, that is another key issue of something that we do focus on. And in terms of Kirklees, we do have a very effective sanctuary scheme where we will help victims of domestic abuse. We try wherever possible and where it's safe to do so to help them to remain in their existing home. So we provide additional security in that home. But we also, by working with Pennine Domestic Violence Group, provide a support worker to the individuals to help them to deal with the issues that they've been facing so that they can remain in their own home. Of course, wherever that's not possible, then obviously we have things in place to make sure that households are safe and they've got somewhere safe to stay until we can secure them permanent accommodation. But that is an issue that is causing a problem for us in Kirklees. Okay, so I don't want to spend all time talking at you because I think you've seen the report, but just perhaps want to go through to talk about some of the other issues in the paper. As you know, that the way that we accept homelessness cases at the moment, the legislation that I referred to, from April this year, we are going to see the biggest change in the way that local authorities are expected to deal with homelessness, probably for the last 40 years, with the introduction of the Homelessness Reduction Act. That Act brings new duties, statutory duties, to the local authority, where we now have to ensure that we are providing information, advice and helping people, all people, no matter whether they're in a priority need group at all, to provide them with information, advice and to help them to secure accommodation. It doesn't mean that we have to provide accommodation for all those households, but we have to take measures, and quite detailed measures, to ensure very early on, sort of from 56 days, that we are ensuring that we're doing a lot with those individuals to prevent their homelessness. It's a two-way process because we expect that the individual concerned or the household will play their part in trying to secure their own accommodation, but we'll set out very clearly a personal housing plan with everyone that comes to us so that we can see what steps we're going to take to help them secure accommodation and equally the steps that they are signing up to find their own accommodation as well. So we've had to spend quite a bit of time working with our staff and preparing for that change in the approach. I think in Kirklees actually we're quite well placed to take on that challenge because we have always adopted a very strong focus on early intervention and prevention and doing as much as we possibly can to help all people that approach us in terms of giving information and advice. It just will mean that we have to spend perhaps a little bit more time with some of the people that we haven't done previously. But again, we hope that that will have a positive impact in securing accommodation earlier in the process, so we see fewer people going into our temporary accommodation and fewer people, again, sleeping, unfortunately, on the streets. In order to assist us with bringing in those new challenges, if you like, we've agreed with the portfolio holder some changes to the allocations policy. which should hopefully help us to address those issues for people who previously haven't been in priority need, and will help them to access accommodation in our council accommodation. But it doesn't mean to say that all individuals will be housed in council accommodation, because a big part of this is to make sure that we're working with the individual to find out what's best suits them in their circumstances. So we'll also be looking at opportunities in private rented sector, and obviously with other social housing providers as well, to ensure that people get the most appropriate accommodation that meets their needs. We're conscious that we're changing the allocations policy, and we're not sure what the impact of those changes will be. So what we've agreed is that we will monitor on a quarterly basis and review on a quarterly basis the impact of those changes, not only for those people we're trying to help through the homelessness route, but obviously other people as well that are in housing need. So, for example, there may be people who have a medical condition that are in housing need, and we want to make sure that the changes we've made to the policy aren't adversely impacting any other group disproportionately. So we'll keep that under review, and we'll keep checking that the policy is doing what it is that the council wants it to do for Kirklees residents. I want to move on now to rough sleep. Is that okay? Do you want to ask questions? Yeah.
At the moment, when we're looking at homelessness, we don't accept people who don't have a local connection to the local authority. But going forward, am I reading this right? Going forward, we may have to accept people who don't have a local connection, because this prevention duty does not have a local connection test.
That's the prevention duty, not the full housing duty. The relief duty does have a local connection test. We do allow people on our housing register that don't have a connection to Kirklees, but they're in the lowest band. So there is some tests around local connection, but the prevention duty is blind to wherever somebody's come from, and they can ask to be referred to any authority in the country. So, yes, that is in there.
So going back, and then the single people, will you help more single people? Do we know what age range those single people are? Have we broken that down?
We do have the breakdown. It's across the age ranges, to be honest, and it's very difficult, as you probably know, for people under 35 accessing the private rented sector when it's a £55 a week local housing allowance rate. So we do see quite some pressure on the housing register from singles, but I would say generally it's across the board. Perhaps the older end don't struggle as much because there is some designated accommodation, but I would say probably below 35 is the most difficult. Although we have had a lot of success with 16 and 17-year-olds, and we do have a social worker, well, 2 social workers in the team, and we have significantly reduced the number that actually go through the homeless route from a high of over 100 to maybe last year less than 20.
Thank you. Mark?
I'd just like to inquire whether you do a lot of psychological assessments, or you've got access to psychological assessments because a lot of people will be struggling, won't they? We try to look at all the needs of the person that comes to us, and going forward with the personalised housing plans, that will give a better structure to be able to talk to them and engage with them more about what support they have or what support they might need, and the plan will be around what our offer to them, how we can help them access services, and what they will do in accepting that offer if that comes up. So it's a more holistic approach to that person's need, because it isn't just about housing. As you say, there are a lot of complex issues that make somebody have a housing need. Does that answer your question?
I'd also be interested to know whether there's a surplus of applicants, or whether you can accommodate everybody who's been accepted as in need.
Those that are accepted through the homeless route do get accommodated into secure permanent accommodation. Some take longer than others depending on their need, where they want to live, their family size, the availability of accommodation. We are particularly stretched for larger family accommodation. So yes, everybody who goes through the homeless route does secure permanent accommodation. It can be as quick as a few weeks, it can take longer.
So can you say there's actually no need for anybody to be on the streets in this council?
I would say it's not just a housing problem. I think, there is perhaps some accommodation that we need, different types of accommodation for a small number of people. The offer of help is there. It is there. But it can be complicated resolving those issues and building up a rapport to get people to trust that you want to help. And we perhaps would look at exploring some of the new models that are being tried around the country, such as Housing First. That might be something we need to look at in the future.
We'll come back to the rough sleeping issue, which is the second part of the presentation. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. On page 11, we've got the block chart about accepted homeless types and things like that. Do we have anything, again, we're dealing with people here, do we have anything with numbers? Because for me, just looking at where we have 17% couples with dependent children, etc., it doesn't tell the picture to me of what these are for people. The causes of homelessness we've referred to as corporate parents under the third bullet point there. How many people do we have an idea of how many are care leavers? Obviously those are which we as a council have. And similarly, having signed the military covenant, and this will apply to both the elements of today's agenda, care leavers, and the other element is military and former military personnel. As a signatory to the military covenant, we have a responsibility to those as well. So if we have any data both for this and for the next section, I think it'd be interesting.
We do have data. I don't actually have it on me. We work very closely with Children's Services about care leavers, and we have a really good pathway for children that are leaving care to go on into independent accommodation. So that is, we're actually putting in we're strengthening that approach with our colleagues in Children's around giving them a higher priority on the housing register, so that they have a minimal wait when they are ready for independence. So I can get you some figures for afterwards.
Yeah, if we could ask for a report which we can give to members of the panel after the meeting, I think that would be really useful. Martin first, then back to you, Judith. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from that, if I understood that, it's the pathway from being in care to being offered your first accommodation. I think as a wider picture, when someone is homeless, as well as asking if they have any military service, we should be asking them if they've been in the care of the local authority, because the first placement is covered, but if for whatever reason someone finds themselves in difficulty later on, again, as a corporate parent, we're responsible for, I think, up to the age of 25. So someone could have been could leave care at 18, get the first accommodation, and subsequently, because of changes, find themselves homeless, and we still have a duty of care and a responsibility to look after them. I think that should be part of the questioning programme, if it isn't, that, have you any military service and have you been in care?
Actually, they are part of the process, for both client groups that you're talking about. We have we ask a series of questions on the housing register about armed forces and past service, and we actually don't have a lot of people on the housing register, but there is a lot of resource, and we have a champion within the team that other staff can go to, because there's charities such as SAFA that will help out with bonds in the private rented sector. So yes, we do ask those questions. Same with car leavers as well.
Judith.
I'm looking at page 3, the assured short-hold tenancies, and some of the reasons we're giving why that could be on the increase. We've got, it could be that the full rollout of universal credit last year is starting to have an impact. I didn't think it was the full rollout. I thought it was just for people who were new claimants. Have we gone through the transitional arrangements yet?
No, you're right, actually. It is the new claimants, yeah. But it was at first, it was just the singles, and now it's all client groups. But yes, it is new claimants. Sorry.
So do we envisage when transitional takes place that we could have further problems?
We do, and we're going to be working with colleagues in Customer and Exchequer. We already do. We help to get discretionary housing payments. We apply for alternative payment arrangements for people, but we do monitor with our colleagues in Customer and Exchequer who it might be affecting, and we do some targeted work with those. It's a particular big issue for the capped larger families.
Am I right in thinking we have a landlords forum as well? And have we spoken to the landlords about this?
At the moment, that's been led by Customer and Exchequer, because they've been talking to them about the different rollout of different benefits. We go along to that. We actually think there's an opportunity for us to be more proactive ourselves in talking to landlords, because we think there's an opportunity to use the private rented sector more.
Related to universal credit, there has been some discussion at the Tackling Poverty group of the impact of the first couple of months of the pilot. And I think one thing I would like to minute is that it would be useful to have a wider look at that within the council, possibly it coming to a full council meeting, really, the evidence on what the impact has been. Don't know what other panel members feel about that.
Yeah, I think we did say that we wanted to see the minutes from the Tackling Poverty group, but we've not received anything.
Yeah, I will go back and have a look at the issue of distributing those more widely, but I'm interested as well in the discussion about it.
Just to point out, the Tackling Poverty group hasn't met since because it got postponed with the weather. So when the next meeting will be raising that. I think it's next week.
Yes, Eric.
Thank you, Chair. In the presentation, the officer mentioned victims of domestic violence. And I'd just like to ask colleagues, and I haven't got a point of referral. If someone approached me that, say it's a woman that's been battered, or it could be a man, who do I approach on their behalf? And could all councillors, please, have that referral point made clear to them?
Do you feel that you've got enough information to respond to that?
We would tend to speak to Pennine Domestic Violence Group, but there is also the domestic abuse officers within the council that frontline officers would talk to, but I can get the contact. Sorry. There are officers within adult social care within the council that are specialist domestic abuse officers, and there's also a Pennine Domestic Violence Group, but I can get the contact details for yourself.
It's just through you, Chair, it sounds extraordinarily complex. If somebody comes to me, they want urgent action, or comes to colleagues, And I just want to phone and say, Mrs X or Mr B is a victim of domestic violence. Who can I refer these to, please? Because sometimes it can be horrendous. Sometimes that person, that woman man has to be removed immediately, and possibly with children. So we do need something other than somebody will pick it up somewhere. We need a telephone number.
Oh, sorry,
really
there is.
What we're saying is that there are people in our social care units, specialist domestic abuse officers. Kathy said we'll get you the contact names of those people so that you do have that plan.
And could it be circulated?
You can. And there is domestic abuse that you rightly pointed out, Councillor Clerk, is that it's a multi-agency approach. So depending on the severity of the issue and the immediacy of the issue, you have a response that is appropriate and relevant to take those individuals or families out of harm. So sometimes it might involve the police. But we will get you the contact details.
There's no clear pathway for us anyway.
Right, if I could, can I just come in first? I think linked to that, domestic abuse is coming up at a number of meetings. It came up at the management group on Monday when we had the crime statistics report. It came up in a meeting I had in my ward. It also came up in the schools hub meeting within my ward. And I think it is really important that we do pull as much information as possible together and we do get that out to all councillors. Yes. Sorry, Jim.
No, I was just going to say a couple of years ago we used to get a lot of information about domestic abuse, but it just seems to have slipped off the agenda. Because I'm not even sure how well funded is PDVG now, who funds them, where they're getting the funding from.
I think they're still well funded through different parts of the council, through housing related support contracts and through adult social care. They are just opening a new refuge, so I think they're doing quite well.
To say on the Community Contacts Act, the Integrated Domestic Abuse Team and the Penland Domestic Violence Group are included on that, but it's under housing and homelessness. And my instinct would be to look under welfare or help in emergency. So it's it took me a while to find out where it's listed. So maybe it needs to be relisted, make it easy for everyone.
Right. A related question. On page 4, it refers to the partnership with a range of bodies like the Job Centre, NHS, Ministry of Defence and so on, that you are working with in terms of prevention work. Do you work with schools and with the schools hubs? Because I do know that they are very concerned about issues like addiction and domestic violence, which is causing real social problems for families and children and sometimes leading to homelessness issues.
We've worked well with schools in the past around young people facing homelessness. We did particularly target the schools where we were seeing 16-year-olds coming to us, the colleges, and we used to run sessions within the schools around what homelessness is, what you can do, trying to do some myth busting that you don't get a flat and it's party time. So we used to do that, but it's very resource intensive. We haven't done that as much, and we've really seen a significant decrease in the number of 16 and 17-year-olds coming to us from the work that we have done. We would refocus on that if we needed to, but in terms of the wider homelessness for families, we haven't particularly ourselves engaged with schools on that agenda.
Yeah, I just think as we're developing hubs, it is an opportunity, possibly for people like yourself to go out and actually make the hubs aware of the early intervention and prevention work which has been undertaken, because I think it is very important, and this is a very, very real problem. Okay. Right.
I also think it's important, as Eric's raised, he didn't know where to refer anybody to. When we used to have the children's advisory boards, all that information used to come up there and we used to be able to talk about it, but we don't have those advisory boards now. So other councillors need to be aware of what's actually going on.
There is a domestic abuse strategic forum, and I believe there's an operational meeting as well, and we have representatives on there, so we can take that back.
It just seems to be officer-led and officers talking to each other, but not actually coming out to us as councillors, and we're in the community all the time.
Yeah, you mentioned refuge earlier on. Does Kirklees actually have a proper refuge for women in particular who are in danger from husbands?
Yes, there are 3 or 4 refuges across Kirklees, and like I say, Penn and Domestic Violence Group are just opening a slightly larger one and closing down a smaller one that they've got. They're run by Connect Housing and Penn and Domestic Violence Group.
Okay. Could I just ask a different sort of question? Looking at the figures for the people who are accepted as homeless, we seem to have a high proportion of single males, 28% as compared to 13% nationally. Is there a specific reason for that? Is it about our generosity in terms of the way we interpret the definition? Are we intervening more to help these people, or are there particular problems here?
We believe it's just our approach to that early intervention and prevention, so it's just the thresholds that we're looking at. So as we're assessing single people, whether they're male or female, we're looking at their vulnerability, and it could be that we're just adopting a slightly more flexible or early intervention approach to that than maybe some of the other authorities are. But we think that's got positive benefits in terms of helping those individuals to secure accommodation early on and prevent them from becoming homeless. So that's the approach we've taken in Kirklees. Other authorities, you know, it's an issue of looking at that vulnerability test, really.
Is there evidence that the prevention and early intervention strategy is having a positive effect? Are we getting benefits from that in other spheres which we can measure?
I think generally in terms of the approach that we've taken around homelessness prevention and the activities that we've undertaken, as I mentioned earlier on, we have for quite a number of years, like all other authorities, because it has been a push nationally to adopt that early intervention and prevention approach in homelessness. It's not something we've done different to other areas, but I think nationally it has been a driver to try and ensure that you don't wait until somebody's at crisis point. You do as much as you possibly can to prevent that from occurring. And we have seen some really good successes in Kirklees. And when we say prevention activity, it has to be a validated prevention activity. We have to report it into government, and we have to be able to evidence and verify that our activity and the support we've given to individuals and households has actually secured them accommodation for, reasonable accommodation for at least 6 months. And so we've got figures around that. So it is a positive approach as early intervention and prevention. And obviously as the council, on a much broader basis, rather than just looking at homelessness, is adopting the early intervention and prevention approach in terms of preventing people needing social care and health care, then that's bound to also add some weight and support to our approach as well. So together the impact should hopefully have that more positive impact.
So the direct correlation we can... Sorry, did you say Nasty?
I thought you said no.
So the direct correlation can be seen through the numbers of rough sleepers we have, which we have a very low number. And in terms of the broader benefits, I think that's probably a piece of work. We haven't got that evidence, I don't think. But there are quite clearly impacts on other services. And so by taking that approach in housing and homelessness, we're preventing people going into needing further services from the council. But to be fair, I don't think we've done that impact assessment to say, well, would they have ended up in adult social care, or would they have ended up in a care home, or would they have ended up in something else that would have been more costly as an intervention, or led to a poorer outcome. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that will be a really useful piece of work, both to judge whether or not this strategy is working effectively, and also to be able to, if there are positive messages there, which I'm sure there will be, to be able to publicise those.
Yeah, just picking up on your point about the single person male, that's quite high, but then if you look at lone parent female, that's quite high. So I just wonder if some of those single person males, it's been a breakdown in a relationship, and so they're single males, but the female tends to be the carer.
Yes.
So that's a single parent. Yeah.
Okay, so I think last time we spoke about rough sleeping, and we wanted just to sort of touch a little bit more around our approach to how we do the estimate in Kirklees. Every year, each local authority either has to conduct an official count or an official estimate of the number of rough sleepers that might be sleeping rough on a snapshot basis, so it is on a particular night. So we do that, and in the report you can see that we've given you the numbers of rough sleepers in Kirklees through the estimates that we've done for the last few years. Obviously this year in 2017 we have seen an increase to 8. So, you know, obviously we don't want to be complacent about that, because obviously that's 8 too many, but just to say that obviously that 8 is not the total number of people that may at any time, you know, be in and out of rough sleeping. What we do is, in Kirklees, is we pull together a group of individuals or organisations that actually work with or come into contact with people who might be sleeping rough, and we all come together and we share our information and intelligence about individuals. And on that particular night in November, we assess who we think would actually have been out. It's always November. It's up.
The window's always October, November, and you report the figure in December, yes. So it happens across the country, but you can choose a night, avoiding things that might influence it. Yeah.
So we've done that on an annual basis in Kirklees, and I think I said last time that when we did it in November, when everybody came together, I think they actually talked about maybe 25 or so individuals. So that's what I just want to get across, because I know people do say to us quite often, oh, we know more people, but it is that snapshot on that night. And I also think I said last time that of those 8 people on that night, we knew that there were 3 of those who actually had temporary accommodation available to them on that night, but had, for whatever reason, not accessed that accommodation. So it's just to put into a bit of context. We also wanted to sort of share with you the sort of regional position and the national position. So the chart on the next page, as Naz was just saying earlier, shows that in terms of performance of rough sleepers per 1,000 population, we actually fare quite well in terms of those statistics. So we think that the approach that we are taking is having that positive effect in terms of the number of people that might be out sleeping on the streets. So we hope that you can see that that is the correlation there in terms of the work that we're doing. Does anybody want to ask anything about rough sleeping in particular? Shall I carry on to the other parts of severe weather? Right. Oh, shall we just carry on? I think Naz was just saying, perhaps just to mention the reasons that we think the increase in rough sleepers, potentially, again, as we've talked about earlier, is maybe around some of the impacts of welfare reforms and some of the, reductions in funding. We've talked about the issues that it's not necessarily about accommodation. There are other issues around mental health, addictions, etc. And obviously, if those support services and services aren't there for people, that may be a reason why. And then finally, perhaps a shortage of appropriate supported accommodation for those groups of people who've got more needs, especially in Kirklees. So that's something that we need to perhaps look at and make sure that we have got sufficiency for those groups of people that need that support, and we'll look at that moving forward. So in terms of, I'll move on to the severe weather emergency protocol. Again, I think we've talked about this before, but during periods of extreme cold or severe weather, then each local authority, again, provides a service to ensure that individuals don't have to be out on the streets during this type of weather. It's a situation where the requirement is relaxed, if you like, in terms of asking lots of questions about priority need. So we would ensure that anybody who wishes to, because obviously we can't force people to take up the offer of a bed, but we do try and engage with people. And what we do there is we share that information out with all of the partners and agencies that we work with, so that they're aware that the severe weather emergency protocol is in place, so that if anyone needs to refer someone into either ourselves or through our emergency number, then they know how they can do that, and we can help people. What happens is then sort of the next day, the staff from our Housing Solutions Service will actually make contact with the individuals concerned and try and help them in terms of assessing their need and the best way forward in terms of supporting them. This year we've had to put severe weather emergency protocol on quite a number of occasions. I think in the last few years perhaps not so much, but I think probably over 35, 40 nights so far this winter we've put the emergency provision on, and again probably this weekend coming up, forecasts are looking likely that we'll be putting that on again. Councillor Scott asked us this time to make sure that we're making sure that all elected members are aware that this service is available, so we're sending that out now. Hopefully you're getting that on a regular basis so that you know that it's working. And the people that we work with, or that actually on a voluntary basis go out and do work wherever we can, we've got a list of people that we make sure that they are also aware that the provision is on, so that they know how they can refer people in during that period of severe weather as well. Just moving on to that, in terms of the work that we do with others, the voluntary sector and other agencies, there has been, and I think we touched on it again last time, a number of organisations or small groups of people that are really committed to trying to help people in this situation. And there is an initiative, and there's a meeting actually this evening. It was supposed to take place when the bad weather was on, but it was cancelled, which has actually been facilitated by Homeless Link, which is a national organisation focusing on rough sleeping and homelessness. So they're facilitating an approach in Kirklees, which is trying to bring together all of those voluntary groups and agencies so that they can network, coordinate, try and make sure they're making the biggest impact that they can by working together. They're also looking at developing together a bit of a good practice guide so that they are aware of the best ways to engage and build rapport and trust and help those individuals. And obviously, whilst we're not running that session or we're not leading it, we are involved, and so that we can work with partners wherever possible to ensure we can maximise the impact for people.
Thank you, Helen, for that report. And that meeting does seem a very useful development in terms of bringing people together. Yes.
I was just going to say that because it's a very emotive subject, is rough sleeping. Do you foresee any barriers with that forum at all? Because a lot of people want to help, and you can see that. You know, people see people on the street and think we've got to get out there and we've got to help them. But those people on the street are also very vulnerable people, and what worries me if they get targeted.
Well, I'll just say what, and then Kath wants to add something. But I think in terms of the guidance that we've got in terms of working together, we're actually asking people, and it is a voluntary thing obviously, but we're asking people to sign up to some principles and some ways of working so that they're taking on responsibilities. And what we're asking is that there will be representatives of that group that would actually form part of a subgroup of the Kirklees Homelessness Forum, where again that's not necessarily led by Kirklees Council, but it is a range of partners that come together and we go along. So this particular group we're hoping would feed in through that, so that we can make sure that we're giving support and guidance to those volunteers. If there is potentially an issue, because not everyone that works out there will want to sign up to the way we want them to in terms of this guidance and this new way of working. And obviously we'll need to try and encourage all groups to ensure that they're safeguarding people and keep an eye on that, I guess.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that. I think if everybody comes together, we can then get a true picture of who is actually on the street. Because I think some people talk to other people and say, we've seen so-and-so on the street, and then other people. And it becomes this big urban myth about how many people are actually on the street.
I think that's very true, and there's a lot of positivity around this this meeting, and we didn't particularly, as a council, want it to be the ones leading it, but being part of it. And there is a lot of goodwill, and everybody wants to harness that and make sure that the help is going to the right people, and it's the right sort of help. And from that, my colleague Steve is starting to have quarterly meetings so that we're gathering more, Helen mentioned it earlier, but gathering more information so that we can target that support. So it has been a positive thing already, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Couple of points. We have a relatively low number of rough sleepers, 5 or 8, depending on you say where it was taken. From the limited experience I've got, you see, rough sleepers seem to occupy the same places each night, and whether that's because that's where they can get aid from. There's one on New Street today where people have been leaving cups of coffee and things as they went past. So rather than, when this severe weather emergency protocol, when SWEP kicks in, if we've got 5 or 8 people that we know where they are, can't someone go to them and tell them that the facility's there, rather than leave it for somebody else to refer? Again, based on my experience with the SWEP when it first kicked in last year, I made a phone call on a Saturday night and the operators didn't know anything, so I would ask that managers periodically do sort of blind checks to make sure that the Kirklees Direct have that information up front and centre, so that when somebody rings in, they're not being told, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. I mean, I hope that can be taken on. The point on either page 6 or page 14, depending on which page in the system you're looking at, is that the common view is it's about accommodation. I think, again, this is a communications thing we need to get, that if there are 8 people, there may be 8 different reasons why they are doing it, and it's not simply that one thing, and it's not maybe not a personal choice. There may be other things leading into it. I hope that we can get some notes from the meeting this evening, because I wasn't aware of it taking place. I think it's a crucial thing that we look at how these disparate and voluntary groups may want to work with each other. One of the things that's been talked about is this principle or agreement or whatever we call it, bearing in mind that anybody who works with vulnerable people should be DBS checked. The last thing I would want in Kirklees, and I hope it isn't taking place anywhere, is that anybody is exploiting people at the lowest. So that anybody who is setting up anything that's working with people, there should be some basic checks to make sure that the people they're coming into contact are not being exploited in any way, and that the public will is carrying through. The work which, for example, the Huddersfield Mission is doing, I know that there are many organisations which are now encouraging their supporters, sponsors and friends to buy a meal voucher. Now that's, on the one hand, that's great, that's supporting people, but I think, again, with a relatively low number, we ought to be looking at what we can do should they wish, and again, the reasons are many, to have an intervention so that people, this time next year, we're not seeing people sleeping in doorways. Is there anywhere, for example, if they wanted, where we could offer some shelter and accommodation? I know some authorities have had converted shipping containers so they're out of the worst of the weather, because sadly the person I saw this morning as I was coming in is in a sleeping bag, he's in a doorway, but his feet are sticking out of the doorway, and so his sleeping bag's wet through. The problems that's going to give, Are there any interventions we can make, either using council facilities, council, car parks or other things that are out of the worst of the weather, where if they don't want to go into Clare House or something else, there is an intervention that gets them out of the worst of the weather for those times and maybe for the future.
Some very important points there. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. So what I suggest is that the report that's come to this panel, I think it would be really good if we could make that available to all councillors so they've got the opportunity to look at. I think the point you raise about notes from tonight's meeting, where the voluntary groups are looking at establishing some protocols, some joint working arrangements, I think that will be useful as well. So if it would be possible to get that information out, then all councillors will be informed of this, and obviously it could be the basis for some further debate. Right, at that point, I think we'd better finish that discussion. Thanks very much to Helen, Kath and Nas for coming along again to speak to us. I think it's been another really interesting discussion, and you seem to have been here quite a lot, I think, Nas and Helen in particular. Thanks very much for your contributions this year to some really interesting discussions that have taken place. Right, the last two items I'm going to hand over to Steve to try and get through them as quickly as possible.
Yes, Chair. Just to try and finish these two items really quickly. We've put on the agenda a copy of the work programme, and it sort of provides a running record of the discussions that have taken place in your panel meetings to date. I think personally you took on some really big items and you've got through some of them. Some of them have generated more requests for information and probably discussions at future meetings. So what I've done is, to cut to the chase, if you look on the last page, there's a box which indicates the things that you have discussed and things that you put markers down that you would like to discuss. So what we'll do is look at those again and roll them forward into the next year, talking to the chair of the panel and chair of scrutiny as well. So that, if that's okay, that will deal with that item on the work programme. Is that okay? Martin.
Yeah, I mean, as this, I think you've said this is our last meeting, so as you obviously at some point you'll be reporting back to council, but I think from my perspective, I'd just like to place on record, I think this has been a very useful panel. We've had a good debate about things, we've got stuck into things. I've enjoyed being a member of the panel.
Yeah, and I would like to extend my thanks. Yeah, and I would like to extend my thanks to both panel members and the whole range of officers who've come along to the meetings. I think they've put together some really good presentations and been very candid and informative in the discussions that we've had with them. So thanks very much for your work.
All right. Last item is the corporate performance reports. These come out on a quarterly basis. I think the last one for Q3 of this municipal year went to Cabinet around the 20th of February. So if it's okay, we'll do what we did last time. I will send you a link to that report. If there's any comments or questions about items in there that are relevant to this panel, if you feed them back in through the chair or myself, we'll get the officers to answer them. It's probably the easiest solution because the report's got 1,001 items in it. You can ask any sort of question and we wouldn't have the right officer here, so we will deal with it in that way. Is that okay?
Yeah, Julie, could I just ask you to say a little bit about the discussions on Monday about how we're going to work with these reports and perhaps be in a better position to scrutinise them?
The performance reports are usually quite dated by the time they get to panel members, so we're talking to officers about a way of streamlining that information so you can get it at a more timely point. It's used normally to inform a lead member briefing, to have an open and flowing dialogue about issues. But to be able to do any meaty kind of investigation into issues that are of concern to you, then we need some more timely data. What we were talking about is there's a new head of intelligence for the council, and he's keen to work with us to try and find more bespoke, tailored reports around intelligence and data that relate to the different topics that each panel is looking at. So we were talking about sharing the work programmes at the beginning of the year to give them time to do more detailed analysis to help you with triangulating information that's coming to the panels. So you're more informed with independent data from various sources. But we're just starting those discussions, and I've got a meeting next week to explore that further. What I'd like to set up is maybe a little kind of a workshop with each of the panels next year, so you can explore the issues and the information that you're really keen to see, and see if we can make that happen. Is that all right?
Right. Thank you, Julie. I just thought it was useful to share that, because it is something that we're hoping to do more effectively going forward. Right, at this point, we're going to draw the public session to a close and just thank everybody again for participating. Thank you.